Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Friday TGIF and Product Owner episode this week with Armin Mandara. Hey Armin, welcome back.
Hey Vasco, thanks for having me back again.
Absolutely. So Friday, Product Owner. Of course, we'll talk about what great product owners look like in a minute. But first, tell us, Armin, what was the worst, potentially, product owner anti-pattern you've witnessed in your career?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so very crucial question, because we know that the relationship and the collaboration between the product owner and the Scrum Master is essential for having successful product development and project management. And when it comes to anti-patterns, I have one specific situation or setup in mind. I was a Scrum Master for a team where we were working in a scaled setup. So there were several teams in place responsible for the development and the rollout of B2B e-commerce platforms for several countries. And my team was responsible for one specific country. And if you would ask me, how was it with the product owner? Truthfully, it's difficult to answer that, because it's difficult to say who the product owner was. Because I'm listing now, we did have a product owner in our team, but with our setup being an agency, it's always a proxy, because the requirements and what we should do come from somewhere else, from the client side. So we had a proxy PO on our end. We had 2 business analysts who were responsible for gathering requirements, writing user stories, etc. We had a local product owner for the country where we were operating for. She was more of a business type of person and doing acceptance testing and these kind of things. She still had the role of local PO, but was not very much familiar with software development or agile ideas. Then we had a chief product owner who was overseeing the overall development, who also had an assistant who was helping him when he was not available. So you see many people involved, many cooks in the kitchen, which I want to emphasize, especially for big products, is absolutely fine to have several people involved in product development. I think we in the Agile community sometimes get it wrong. There has to be only one person who is responsible for everything, who takes decisions, manages the backlog, does market research, etc. For big projects, for big products, this is not realistic. But what you still need is clarity. You need clarity in decision making. To who do I get if I need a decision on priority? And in our setup, it was not always very clear, because we had just many roles, many people involved in the whole idea of product management. And I would say this is a big anti-pattern that I faced, and I believe that's much around there, where you have the PO as a committee, where you have a lack of decision making, a lack of clarity of ownership, but where everybody just throws out there what they need until when they need
Some
it.
tips.
Yeah, where everybody is very much focused on their own needs and what they want. But in order to manage product development efficiently, you need some sense of gatekeeper, somebody who can actually make tough decisions.
Right? And coherent
Absolutely.
decisions. And that's one of the things. And I think that's one of the aspects we very often kind of ignore on the product owner skills. Obviously, one key aspect is to set a vision, to understand the customer, to know what the customer is struggling with, what they need, etc. But there is one aspect which is key, that even if you know all of the others, but you can't make decisions, like in this case, the setup was made so that it was very hard to get decisions made that were coherent with each other, right? The decision-making process is actually one of the core functions of the whole PO role, not necessarily the PO person, because as we just heard, there could be several people involved. But the PO role needs to be able to bring that clarity that you mentioned and that crystal clear and timely decision-making.
Absolutely. And one of the negative consequences of this is indeed this lack of ownership and there's a lacking sense of responsibility. And if you have also, in the worst case, a toxic environment, then you have the blame game starting. Oh, it's not me who's responsible for that, it's that person. And these are some dirty waters you move in if you have such a situation. So what we can do as Scrum Masters here is to make issues transparent. And that's what I did. I actually drew some sort of communication map of the whole situation, and I made some suggestions on how we can improve. We did incorporate some of these improvements, not everything, I must say, because us working in an agency setting, we usually have a very specific scope of what we should do. And it's not always very welcomed then to tell the customer what they should change internally in their organization and how they operate. So one thing you learn in our setting is also to have some sense of pragmatism and to just make sure that things keep on working, even though you have some limiting factors and not everything is ideal. Certainly.
And we can always find an internal advocate for the things that are necessary for the team to succeed. It's not always easy, and sometimes it takes a long time, but that's also a possibility, of course.
Absolutely.
So that was the anti-pattern. But Armin, now share with us potentially the best product owner you've ever worked with. How did they work?
When it comes to a great product owner, I have a specific project in mind. It was a couple of years ago, and we were hired by a company to implement some e-commerce services for them. And we were having an internal team of developers, so backend devs, front-end QAs, and so on. And we also had roles from client side. Requirements engineer, for example, was from client side. And also the product manager on client side, he was highly involved. He was, from our perspective, the key stakeholder. And also acting as a product owner when it comes to decision making, when it comes to defining scope, etc. We also had an internal PO like we usually do, because the difficulty when working with clients is making sure that they understand agile ways of working, that they understand how software development works, what's expected from them, making sure that they can take time for taking decisions, giving feedback, and so on. And why this collaboration was so great was because the product manager on client side, he just had a good understanding of what's expected from him, what he should do, and also what he should not do. He was, to give you an example, in our refinement meetings, where we would go through the top backlog items, we would check, are they clear? Do we have all the information? Are the acceptance criteria complete, etc.? And we would also do some form of estimation in our refinement meetings. So we had people from client side there, and of course our team. And the good thing was that he was there, so the product manager from client side, to make decisions when there is some uncertainty. And that's why it's so important to have this direct content between business and tech, because you avoid any feedback loops. So having that set up, it was just very easy and smooth, because he would make decisions just in time if they were needed. But, and now here's the important factor, when it came to the estimations, he did the exact right thing. He shut up, basically. He didn't say anything. He knew that this is something regarding that the team has to do, and that's how they plan their work. And imagine from team perspective, it could be quite a difficult situation having the client there challenging estimations. That's
and I'm sure many people listening to us have been in that situation.
Probably. And it's an uncomfortable situation to be in, but he understood his role there. He knew that he is the product manager, he is our stakeholder, but he is there to provide feedback, to make decisions on the scope, to make decisions on priority. He is not there to challenge how we plan and how we estimate our efforts. So that was a very enlightening experience to collaborate with this company, to collaborate with these people. Of course, like always, there were some hiccups every now and then, but the overall collaboration was working well. The people on client side knew their responsibilities, what's expected from them and what's not expected from them. And also we had some awesome colleagues on our end, great developers who were just good at their profession. So I really like to think back on this project and how everybody was collaborating well to deliver great products. And for a Scrum Master, of course, there is always this sense of relief that the PO knows what's expected from him. And of course, the PO on the client side, but also the PO we had internally, also doing a great job when it comes to release management, making sure that we deliver the milestones on time, that we stay in budget, and taking care of these fun things. So yeah, and just to summarize, what does it mean to be a good PO then? What I noticed in that collaboration was being pragmatic, really making decisions, not postponing difficult decisions, being aware of what is a trade-off, that you cannot have everything, that if you want this user story in the upcoming sprint, you have to remove something else. And this way of thinking was certainly there. So yeah, lots of positive memories that I have working in that project.
And a great set of things to look at and to go through together with our POs in our own jobs, and make sure that they understand. Why not share this episode with them and let them hear from Armin's voice what it feels like working with a great PO. Armin, thank you very much for all of this week, all the stories and insights you've shared with us. We're close to the end, but before we go, where can people find you and the work that you're doing?
Sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Armin Mandara. And yeah, I would say that's the main point of contact.
And we'll put the link on the show notes to make sure you have an easy way to find Armin. And why not ask a few follow-up questions? Start the conversation. Armin, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thanks a lot, Vasco, for having me and giving me the chance to share my experience.
One more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast is over, but there's a lot more we have to share. We have developed our own membership site where you find a community of active and engaged Scrum Masters. In this site, you get access to exclusive content and get to interact with us, your podcast hosts, as well as the best Scrum Masters in the world. So join us at scrummasterpodcast.com and keep this podcast free of advertising. See you next week for one more full week of Scrum Master tips and tricks. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.